Well, hello everybody. Welcome into Great Atmosphere here on this Monday, March 25th of 2024. Pretty quick video today. Just going to be talking about the severe outbreak that is currently taking place this evening across portions of the south and the southeast, along with taking a quick look at just what the major surface low that we're currently experiencing across the Central Plains is doing in terms of dictating that severe threat, and also the back end blizzard threat that's coming out of the Central Plains. As long as a quick look ahead as to the rest of the week, a little change in what was expected to be a not so great Easter weekend has actually turned out to be quite great. So that's good. We'll take a look at that, and we'll finish out the day by taking a look at some more medium range stuff to see what is potentially down the line. Perhaps March comes to actually a quite nice end, so we'll definitely be taking a look at all those things. Before we get started, just want to quickly encourage you to hit the subscribe button and the bell as well to get notifications whenever I post one of these forecasting videos. Typically, it'll be 2 or 3 videos a week during the weekdays. It'll be essentially whatever my work schedule kind of allows, so I'm doing this one on Monday today, and then later this week I'm quite excited. I'm definitely going to be doing a full 2024 total eclipse preview for the upcoming total solar eclipse that'll be occurring on April 8th. Very, very excited about that, so I'll be doing a full breakdown about what the implications of that eclipse are, and just kind of where it stands in history, as well as some astronomical little tools and whatnot. Maybe even getting to take a look at some 10-day outlooks to see what parts of the country will be able to see this eclipse best. So let's start out today by looking at the True Color Kona satellite imagery. We can see kind of our major players here. We have a pretty significant deep low that's sitting off and churning in the Atlantic Ocean, and then we also have some pretty dominant flow, I would say, that's coming out of this very, very deep trough that is based up in the northern reaches of Canada, but it has dipped all the way down and into the south central plains. And there's quite a bit of shearing involved with this as well, and you can see just how dynamic this system is. So we have flow that essentially comes out and in like this, and then we have our low pressure system that's spinning like here. And then if you can also see especially when I play this forward, that the whole I would say a mid-level pattern is kind of going in this direction, but it's pulling in the low levels moisture that's coming in this direction. Now, if you don't know what that technically is, that is called shear or wind shear. It comes in 2 different flavors. You can get both speed shear, so you have differences in speed based off of height. So you can have lower speed winds in the surface and then higher speed winds aloft. That is a type of wind shear. And then you can also have directional shear, which just means that they're going in 2 different directions at different layers of the atmosphere and height. And they're not mutually exclusive. You can have them both at the same time. And typically they are one of the significant factors that goes into creating a large-scale thunderstorm threat. So that's why where we see these 2 air masses kind of meeting, right around in here is kind of our bullseye for today in terms of creating some severe weather on the back end. And then I'll let this play out. You can see the tightening that is going on kind of along the entire length here. You have some fog that it's coming in on the back end just because this is such cold, frigid Arctic air that the general low is advecting in from the north. And then you have all this deep southern moisture that's being advected in all the way from the south, and it's creating a mess all the way up and down the central plains. And then that flow pattern is continuing to bring in moisture as well across the Pacific Northwest, creating some additional snow in the higher elevations of the Intermountain West and the Pacific Northwest. Specifically, you see some convection out there in the Cascadian Plateau, but that's generally speaking what we are looking at today. Quite a lot to digest. So let's kind of dive into the pattern. You can see this is our upper level flow pattern right now. Polar jet dominant, coming all the way down and out and into Mexico and Texas. Divergence pocket right in here. This is an area where we are watching for severe weather today. And then anytime if we do our 4-quadrant model, let's do that as the main streak. We would expect that the left exit region, or generally the exit region in general, wherever there is divergence aloft, for that to be the primary areas where we would expect to see severe convection, and thus a low to form along these areas. But because this has a little bit of a short wave right here in the upper levels, it's kind of disjointed our full trough. So we have like different areas where we have areas of spin, and then this area is broad. So there's a lot going into this, and then we have our parent low that's up here. So, and this is all in the upper levels. So because we have so much disturbance in this area, there isn't just like one solid trough here. We're creating for ourselves just kind of this elongated mess, and you can see what this looks like in the lower levels at the 850 millibar level, also at the low-level moisture transport level, that the surface low is very much elongated. We have a center point that's kind of right here in like the Kansas region, and then that goes all the way up into central Minnesota. And what that does effectively is that it kind of enhances the spin all the way up and in through the pretty much the Mississippi and Missouri River Valley, going all the way up and into the northern Midwest. And essentially that just kind of elongates both our severe threat going all the way from the deep south up and into the Chicago metro region, particularly in the areas of the St. Louis and Missouri, wherever that short wave kind of sits. You can kind of see that little area of diffluence right there. But that essentially just kind of makes everything extend all the way down and in. So this whole area on the back end is getting enhanced cold air advection from Canada because of it. And because that moisture is so strong, and it has an enhanced, because it reached the Great Lakes, which are still ice-free, that's an additional area of moisture that comes in on the back end, creating quite a significant snow threat for this region, which they certainly do need it. But because of this, because the low is deepening and it's strengthening still, kind of taking on more of a neutral meridional flow tilt axis, the winds that are coming out of this are screaming as well. So blizzard warnings are in effect for the central regions of South Dakota, Nebraska, and even into northeastern or northwestern Kansas, parts of Colorado as well, just because of that, with winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings extending out ahead of that line. And then it's kind of like wherever those areas are revolving around is, it's not pleasant by any means, but it's certainly calmer because we have high wind warnings out in effect for pretty much anywhere ahead of where that cold frontal boundary is. And then areas where we see triple points, which would be convergences of dry air mass, moist air mass, and cold and warm air mass all coming together. That's kind of where we would expect to see the most severe thunderstorms out of this, which the SPC has highlighted to be in this region right here for today in central Mississippi and central to northeastern Louisiana, with slight risks extending out for the entirety of Mississippi and Louisiana, and extending out into central Alabama and southeastern Arkansas, with marginal risks along the line out ahead of it. And wherever that kind of shortwave that we mentioned there's just that little perturbation that we're concerned about in Missouri. Could be a little bit of a cold core tornado setup up there. We'll take a look at that. But those are generally speaking where we are expecting to see severe weather out of this. And then that goes into tomorrow as well. Not as significant of a risk according to the SPC for tornadoes per se. Mainly a straight line wind event out of this. No hail threat out of it. So not an all hazard scale index. Extending out into the Mobile Bay of Alabama and the Panhandle of Florida, with a mild risk for Indiana, central Illinois, and up into the majority of the mitten that is Michigan and northwestern Ohio. So we can take a look real quick. Actually, first we'll take a look at what the 72-hour snow accumulation for the CONUS has been. You can see that Minnesota and Wisconsin have gotten quite a bit of snow out of this. Probably the first significant snowfall for areas up this region for the entire, it's not even winter anymore, so can't even count that as part of the metric, but they are catching up just a little bit along with areas of the Dakotas. And then also we had quite a big system come through and into New England and the higher elevations up in there in upstate New York, extending into northern Maine and New Hampshire and Vermont, particularly along higher elevations along the Connecticut and Hudson Valley. So certainly an interesting setup there, and the Sierra Nevada continues to get bombarded with multiple feet of snow. and on the back end we see the higher elevations of Colorado and areas in the upper Mountain West continuing to get snow as well. So let's take a look at what the radar currently looks like. You can see a line of storms, and I'm recording this at about 5 o'clock Eastern on Monday. You can see not as much of a discrete supercellular threat coming out of this. We do see two distinct lines. They're beginning to merge as we start to get more meridional flow, and the back end of this system starts to try to occlude a little bit and fill in. And when that happens, we're ultimately going to be left with one kind of QLCS line. We do see there is a little bit of an undulation at the very end of this. Hopefully I can just kind of pause this. So you see where this kind of like S is forming right here in the line. Whenever we kind of see like that, we would kind of look out ahead in whatever this direction is, and I would start to kind of be concerned in areas points south of enhanced convection there, just because we do see a little bit of that kind of mesoscale shift within the within that particular linear system, which typically could preclude a tornadic event. Nothing seems to be out there as of right now in terms of tornado warnings, but we will definitely take a look at some soundings that are quite concerning. So we're going to take a look right now. This is our upper level map according to the SPC. Pretty significant upper level trough that's currently sitting over Kansas, and extends obviously down and in from the areas of Western Canada. And just look how deep it has dug into the into the contiguous U.S., dipping all the way down and into Mexico and bringing up all that moisture, warm air and moisture up and in from the south all the way up and into the north. Quite significant temperature profiles and high amounts of moisture coming out of this particular system. We can also take a look at what that low-level jet looks like at the 850 millibar level. Just look at the wind profiles coming out of this is quite insane. And because this is the primary area of moisture transport, we can see just how significant that effect is on the back end coming out of the Great Lakes as well. And of course the red and blue lines indicating temperature in degrees Celsius. So where you see this 0 degree blue line would be kind of your freezing layer. Of course, this is about a mile up in the atmosphere, but it still kind of denotes where that cold air is currently being advected in. Via these wind barbs that are quite significant, about 30 to 40 knots in some cases, and then particularly in areas in our area of concern, they're hatched down in here, red hatched, which means that those winds are screaming well over 50 knots in the low-level regions of the atmosphere. Quite a bit of shear, I'm sure, on the front end, just because I would imagine probably those low-level shear those shear wind vector values are probably going to be higher than that of some upper levels, which is a pretty significant indicator for a severe system to come out of it if there's multiple levels of undulating shear throughout the profile of an atmosphere. And then we can see just how disjointed this surface low looks. We can see that it seems to have formed some various low centers out of this, with the primary one being in the Kansas City region right now, but that it still is quite, that is generally speaking the whole this kind of extending down and into the DFW region all the way up and into Iowa, and then coming back in on the back end here. That's quite a disjointed system. Should kind of disturb a lot of people's plans going all up and down that particular corridor. We can take a look at a sounding here that I pulled that was out ahead of where the warm front should be right about now. I think that's it's in central Mississippi, about 50 miles or 30 miles west of Jackson. And this is a traditional tornadic signature here that we're seeing. Significant low-level shear. You can see that low-level jet is screaming. We got wind, we got speed and directional shear throughout the column, which is denoted by low wind speeds coming out of the southeast at the surface. And then we get up to 55 knots at the low-level jet, and then it goes down again. It drops about 10 to 15 knots when it goes up above the low-level jet, before starting to get quite significant in the upper levels. So, and you can see that denoted in the photograph. We have strong surface layer shear extending out and in from, so we see in the lowest levels of the atmosphere from the first kilometer, surface to 1 kilometer, we have SRH levels of 371, 37 knots of bulk shear. That is a quintessential tornadic signature for that purpose alone, but we also have over 1,000 joules per kilogram of D-CAPE, which is downdraft CAPE, or downdraft convective available potential energy. That's essentially your straight line wind event. 3-CAPE is CAPE in the lowest 3 kilometers of the atmosphere specifically, not 3 kilometers, 300 meters. And that's at 21. That's an elevated level for that particular parameter. We have PWatts over 1.75 inches per cubic meter in the atmosphere. SRH levels I've seen much higher out of different soundings that I've seen in the 500 and 600s as well. BRN is close to 100 meters per second squared. We have a LCL that is quite low in the atmosphere. Cloud deck is pretty much right, just about, I would say probably about 500 meters above the surface. So the cloud deck is quite near the surface. Wouldn't take a lot to get any kind of horizontal spin that we would see at the surface. The second that gets any kind of push up into the vertical, you would expect to see perhaps some mesoscale level spin in the atmosphere with some broad rotation. So, and then look at this elevated mix layer. The mix layer goes all the way up into the 700 millibar level, 3 kilometers up in the atmosphere. So, because I didn't see a lot of convergence at the surface levels, I'm not too concerned about a discrete threat. We didn't see any major supercellular storms coming out ahead of the primary QLCS line, mainly I would say due to that fact. So that's good, because if they were out ahead, if any supercells were to form in that juice, you have a warm sector, I'm sure there was probably a good chance for some long track tornadoes, but thankfully that didn't occur. And now anything that does occur is going to largely be more of a linear part of the primary line. Hopefully not rain wrapped, and the system can fully peter itself out before we get into the nocturnal regions, nocturnal hours of the day. But certainly something to look at. So a little bit in a dry pocket aloft as well. And lapse rates, the lapse rates are not, in the lower levels of the atmosphere, are not particularly great as well. I think that also contributed to our low discrete threat. But certainly an interesting one for sure. And that hodograph certainly does scream significant, the shear necessary to create perhaps a strong tornado. So let's see what this looks like over the next 24-36 hours. We do see this is up at the 500 millibar level in the upper levels. We can see it takes on originally kind of this more positive tilt in this direction, and then it goes a little bit more neutral meridional. That's kind of at that point right there, I would say. Well, right here, this would be 3Z, which is about 9-10 p.m. tonight. We do see a little area of convergence over Missouri, or divergence, sorry, over Missouri, which if this starts to like kind of bulge out like this, I would say, then we would kind of get a little bit of a cold core threat on the back end. Cold core tornadoes are a unique signature, I would say. Don't want to get too involved in that, but that's certainly a risk for that particular region of Missouri, I would say, going into tonight, if we do see a little bit more enhanced divergence aloft due to that particular thing. And then we have little short waves that are popping out ahead into the Midwest. I think this is going to be where our primary threat will be tomorrow for any severe weather. I know there was a marginal risk for the area. I wouldn't be surprised if that gets bumped up to a slight, just like we saw for the Florida Panhandle. But that is generally all she wrote before she starts to kind of occlude and go up. It'll kind of shoot up and into the Great Lakes, the low itself, and then it'll start to elongate. So here's the other element to this as well. When it starts to merge with the parent low up in Canada, it'll leave a stationary boundary that'll be sitting kind of over the majority of the eastern seaboard. And because it was so elongated earlier during the week, that stationary boundary can kind of just sit there for a minute and just kind of continue to pump in some warm, moist air from the Gulf and kind of create maybe an accelerated precipitation event for the majority of the eastern seaboard going into the middle part of our work week this week. So certainly something to keep an eye on. We can see just how these dew points look as well, because obviously thunderstorms need strong moisture out ahead of it. Look, we got dew points up in up near 69 degrees Fahrenheit as a dew point in Louisiana. Certainly a very juicy, warm atmosphere, but we got those dew points extending up into the lower 50s all the way up and into Iowa and Wisconsin, Illinois. So certainly the atmosphere is primed, and you can see kind of what my fear is here, where when we have that little undulation, where we have cold, dry air on the back end coming down and in, pushing in further into a easterly component, pushing out and in some more warm and moist air. And on the back end of it, we do get that kind of like overall spin like this, right? You know, that can lend itself into a triple point kind of setup, which would be a cold core tornado output. So something to keep an eye on going into the later parts of today and into tomorrow. But I do believe that valve kind of shuts off in that regard. We do get enhanced moisture out and into the Ohio River Valley tomorrow. I think that's kind of what my main concern is going forward there. But as far as the majority of the southeast prior or after this low starts to move up and out, there really isn't a lot of forcing that gets associated with it. Not a lot of good severe convective initiation for the rest of the southeast near the Carolinas and Georgia. Would not be concerned about that moving forward. So let's look at what the NAM 3 kilometer looks like. We can see that that snow it keeps on churning away in Wisconsin and Minnesota and Nebraska, and then as that low starts to move up and into the northeast, that primary line of storm starts to really affect Mississippi and Alabama into tonight, starts to take on, and as the two energies kind of separate, they'll both kind of dissipate on their own right, going into the evening hours and into tomorrow. You can see kind of where that concern is. It looks kind of like a discrete threat according to the NAM for the Midwest, Indiana, and Ohio going into tomorrow. And then we still have that extended line, should be more of a wind event than anything, going into the majority of the day tomorrow. And then we get a stationary boundary that sets up along the eastern seaboard like we see, kind of just creates an unsettled day of wet weather across the central portions of the Piedmont regions of pretty much the entire southeast states, extending from Virginia down and into Florida. Then let's take a look out into the medium term real quick. We're going to take a look at our European AIFS, or the Artificial Intelligence Forecasting Model. You can see, generally speaking, kind of a shift in what we were originally thinking. Originally, last week, we were expecting that Easter weekend was going to be a little bit of a washout, which was not a good thought to have, especially for those that have an extended weekend off. But let's take a look at what that change looks like. So we go forward in time, we see our general trough kind of making its way across the central U.S. before really deepening up and into the Canadian prairie, the trough itself. Still having its effects made on the southeast going into the majority of the week, but out behind this is the new part. So originally, we had this ridge right here was going to push up and into Alaska, and what that would do is essentially the resulting low that comes out ahead of it, kind of in that original omega blocking fashion that we saw last week. It would kind of take on the same pattern that we did see, we are seeing currently this week, where that additional low will start to push out and into the south central plains and then take its neutral tilt and make its way off and into the northeast. That does not seem to be the case, as the ridge, instead of going towards Alaska, is now shifted more further east and into the coastal regions of British Columbia, which essentially created another cutoff low situation that is going to essentially make this low just kind of go south, down along the entire length of the Pacific coast. And while that should be good in terms of creating more of a moisture event for the Pacific coast, what that essentially does, it replaces us pretty much over the central plains and the southeast under a pretty significant ridge, which will warm us up and dry us out and create some very pleasant weather for the extended Easter weekend before we start to get another trough set up on the back end in the work week next week. And that cutoff low starts to become more of a shortwave trough before deepening again as it approaches the Gulf and creates a potential severe threat for the southeast into the latter portions of the next week. And then after that, it's eclipse weekend, and everyone will be on the lookout to see where the where the clouds are going to be. That is not entirely promising. It's 6Z, but at 18, let's look at 21Z if we can. At 0Z, 18Z. This does not bode well for the Northeast. Just looking at this right now, but it's cool that we're seeing this now in our medium range models. That's going to be my primary focus going forward. Not looking good for the Northeast as of right now, I would say. And then areas kind of in this, wherever you see that southwesterly flow out ahead of the trough, those would be areas I would expect to see some more cloud cover, just solely based on this one level of guidance alone. Let's take a look at what the temperatures are going to look like throughout the course of the rest of the week. We have this going Monday and Tuesday. We have that very, very cold air. These are high temperatures. You're looking at this map here on the top left. High temperatures, so 27, 65 near Kansas City, and then later on in Dodge City, just same state, is at 29 for the day. So quite a significant disparity of temperatures, while the Midwest itself is anomalously warm. We're still very cold in the southeast. And then we'll move forward in time and see that cold start to progress out and over the majority of the country. This is Wednesday, Thursday. And then on the back end, we start to see that ridge start to build. We'll have the low that comes down south from the coast of Washington down and into the Southern California region, and just open us up to some very pleasant weather. Anomalously warm going into our Saturday and into Sunday as well. Let's see if we have a Monday there. We don't. But look at that, just that middle part of the weekend, very dry, very warm, above seasonal temperatures in that regard. And we can see that denoted by the GFS ensemble. That shows that across the majority of the southeast. But out ahead of it, it does have us cooling back down on the back end, returning to more below average temperatures in the 10 to 15 day outlook, as we expect to see some more troughs fill in to a more unsettled pattern following the Easter weekend. So we see that if reflected also by the CPC, denoting a more above average temperature outlook, and then returning back to more of a normal area after the Easter weekend. And let's take a look at some of our enhanced risks. We do have risks of heavy precipitation. When do they have this? They have this as a slight risk across the majority of the southeast, extending into our work week next week, which is to be expected. And then yeah, let's take a look at what our GFS and Euro outputs look like. So this is, we're going to start us off here, taking a look at that ridge after it moves through. But there is just, the main story I'll take away out of this particular guidance is there's not a lot of agreement between these two flagship models of how this looks like. You can see they are both in agreement that low does make its way south and sit off of the South California coast. As to what the implications are on the front of that, though, there does seem to be quite a big disparity in terms of timing and severity of whatever trough kind of succeeds that particular setup. So not a lot that we do know for certain past past Easter weekend. 7 days out does not seem highly effective as of right now in terms of forecasting skill. And I do know that both the Euro and the GFS have been a little bit down in terms of their accuracy as of the past 4 or 5 days in terms of quality metrics. So just something to keep an eye on, and we'll definitely be taking a look at a lot of these things going forward. But that's all that I have for you today. So I do appreciate you all tuning in. Please do subscribe to the channel. I will be doing my full eclipse preview next. Should expect that to be either Wednesday or Thursday of this week. And looks to be some pretty pleasant weather out ahead of this, so I'll put a lot of extra effort into making sure that video was good. And that's pretty much all I got for you. I do appreciate you tuning in, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.